Hello there, my name's James Kelly and welcome to a very special edition of the Scot Popcast. I'm joined today by Alex Salmond, the leader of the Alpha Party, fresh from his launch of the campaign today. So how are you, Alex?
Fine. It's my umpteenth interview, but
okay, sorry about that.
So I've done. No, I'm fresh as a daisy. But
yeah, I'm sure you are.
I'm sort of reflecting. It's quite interesting. It's a campaign launch. It was quite an interesting campaign launch. It was lots of meat in the campaign, some grit and oyster of the independence argument, some great concepts put forward. I'll have a close look at the television tonight and see how much of it is taken.
Yeah.
And if, as I suspect, it will appear in lots of places, of course, but if I suspect the BBC Scotland and STV are largely absent from their coverage, then it will reinforce my impression that they're not fulfilling their obligations to the people, never mind their broadcasting licenses or undertakings under the Charter. Anyway, it reinforces my suspicions that Scotland is very poorly served by its television output.
So what about the question of your absence from the debates, or the debates so far, or your possible absence from future debates?
Well, the debate, God only knows. The debate so far was understandable, excusable, defensible, because at that stage last Tuesday, 1 week ago, we didn't have our candidates in the field.
Yeah.
So very reasonably, though they never made this argument, a broadcaster could say, well, the BBC in this case, how do we know you've got candidates? So we didn't push the argument, but we are pushing it now, and we pushed it after our 32 excellent candidates were in the field. And thus far, we get the usual prevarication, stalling, mealy-mouthed nonsense from both the BBC and STV. The fact that they can't even summon up a decent argument between them, but give you stalling, arrogant, dismissive, we'll get back to you when we finally decide how we're going to turn you down, sort of applies. These are people who should look to themselves and what their public duty is. I think probably second only to the Electoral Commission. They are letting down the electorate. Now, if I may say about the BBC, and I'm fighting an entirely positive campaign, as you're well aware, James. So, and that's what we're going to do. But if there was half the audience watching at the end of that BBC debate started watching it, I'd be surprised. As I pointed out, the BBC's main sin in this campaign so far is to send people to sleep on a nightly basis. There was a debate totally lacking of any interest or vigour or intelligence and examination. That's not necessarily the fault of the participants. It's the fault of the format, the complete lack of imagination, the complete lack of grit of how the BBC, with all their vast resources, organises a political debate. And the only moment of any memorable nature in the entire debate was when Anna Sarwar put down Douglas Ross in the last 2 minutes of the debate. But unfortunately for the BBC, that was 58 minutes into the broadcast before there was anything worth watching. So how many folk were left by then, goodness only knows. So I think the BBC are on a mission to bore people to death. So it's not just the exclusion of Alex Salmond, which obviously would be entirely reasonable to include the Alpha Party under the rules because of our parliamentary representation, because of the local councillors, because we were mentioned 5 times in the debate we weren't present at.
Yeah, exactly.
Because much of the discussion that's been injected into this election campaign and the only form of life has been Alpa's arguments for an independent Scotland. For all these reasons and our 32 excellent candidates, a length and bread for the country, and instead, the coverage we get from BBC Scotland is usually accompanied by some sneer or other from their journalism, which. So it's not so much discrimination against Alex Salmond. I think it's discrimination against the electorate for not having the guts or the gumption or the guile to produce television programmes which are worth the watching. STV, I'm afraid, are no better. Their news coverage is marginally better than the BBC, but their attitude to debates. These are television companies who look like they have every intention of conducting their coverage of a Scottish election campaign in a well-trodden rut, which will be of little or no interest to the Scottish people in what should be the most exciting, innovative, interesting election in very recent Scottish political history. A remarkable failure in broadcasting terms, never mind in terms of political impartiality.
Okay, so turning to the super.
Apart from that, I quite like them.
Turning to the supermajority idea that you're pressing for. Obviously, in 2011, you were the SNP leader when the SNP won their only overall majority, and in that election, you were not asking for people to avoid wasting their vote by voting for the SNP. You were asking for both votes SNP, and it was actually very successful because you won seats in 7 out of the 8 regions. The only one you didn't win was in Lothian. It was 16 list seats altogether, and without those list seats, you wouldn't have had the majority. So, isn't there a sort of contradiction between what you were saying in 2011 and what you're saying now?
No, not in the slightest, James. I can remind you that both votes SNP wasn't our argument in 2011. It was Alex Salmond for First Minister.
Okay, fair enough.
And if you examine the ballot paper, you'll see that the initials SNP don't appear in the regional list ballot. The regional list ballot carries the motif Alex Salmond for First Minister, and then the SNP symbol, of course. But the point was, we gave people an argument. What we said in 2011, excuse me a second, I've been talking a lot today, as you understand.
No problem.
I'll take that bit again. You can edit out my coughing.
Okay.
What we said in 2011 was, on the list vote, the reason for voting in the list vote for Alex Salmond was First Minister. If you want me to continue as First Minister, vote for Alex Salmond for First Minister, SNP in terms of the overall list, on the party vote. That was the reason and rationale that we gave people for voting. And that's why you'll find, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty certain I do, but I know I'm in the presence of the guru of electoral statistics in Scotland, the real guru. That's Sir John Curtis guy, just an impersonator at best. But if I remember correctly, we got 45% on the constituency vote and 44.5% on the list vote. In other words, there was no slippage whatsoever in the two votes, because people were given a reason for voting for Alex Salmond for First Minister. What we said to people, vote for your constituency SNP person, and if you want Alex Salmond as opposed to Ian Gray to be First Minister, that's why you vote in the list. That is not both votes SNP, which against all evidence is going to return virtually nobody. For example, I'm speaking to you from Ellen in Aberdeenshire, where in the last election, Scottish elections in the northeast of Scotland, there were 137,000 SNP votes on the list, who elected 0. Absolutely no MSPs. If a goodly proportion of these votes and others, including Daily Mail readers, as I said earlier at the press conference, flock to the Alapa banner in this election, you know what will happen. 4 Alapa MSPs will be elected. And therefore, the opportunity is staring everyone in the face to vote Alapa on the regional list, vote SNP in the constituency, and to mobilise that independent supermajority, which the Sunday Times, as you know, in their poll projected at, I think, 79 seats at the weekend, but actually I think it could be 90 or higher if people vote Alapa on the list. So it seems to me a clear, overwhelming argument that, given that we're putting up a serious challenge and are serious candidates fighting a serious election campaign, that the opportunity is there for independent supporters and others who just like a bit of grit in the political oyster of Scotland.
I mean, Nicola Sturgeon has said that you're a bit of a gambler. And there is a slight gambling element to this, isn't there? Because it's true that you could get a greater number of pro-independent seats as long as Alapa are above a certain level. But if you fall below, 5 or 6% in every region, you could get absolutely nothing. And if those votes come away from the SNP, that could cost the SNP a few list seats. For example, in 2011, even in the Northeast, you won 1 seat in the Northeast on the list.
Yeah, we did, and that was Mark MacDonald, who had to go home and change because it was kind of unexpected. But that was because we gave people a reason for voting and didn't just parrot out the message, both votes SNP. The opportunity and the upside. I mean, look, people will determine this. If they think it's worthwhile having Alapa in the Parliament, then they'll vote in substantial numbers for Alapa on the regional list vote, and you'll return a lot of Alapa MSPs. You're quite right. No party stands for election without the risk of achieving nothing.
Yeah.
But the upside on Alapa is great. If Alapa, having in a week achieved scores on the board, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
If Alapa starts motoring in this election, then it's an exponential rise in the number of Alapa seats, as you're well aware, because you understand these things closely. So the upside is great for independence. I think the downside is very limited indeed, but the upside is huge. And I think many people, and as the only thing that surprises me thus far, James, is that we're registering already. That's a surprise to me.
Yeah.
I thought it would take time for that argument to work its way through. I mean, you and I are political cognoscenti. Well, you are at least. You understand the argument. You know what the upside is. You also know what the downside is. But most people take a while to understand it. I'm telling you, as people understand that, if they're independent supporters, the vast majority of them will vote Alapa on the second vote, on the list vote, on the regional list vote, for the arguments that are very clear, which we'll be getting across. 137,000 SNP list votes in the northeast of Scotland, giving a return of 0 MSPs, and the potential to replicate that in most of Scotland by voting Alapa and getting a very substantial number. As for me, look, I'm in a positive campaign. I'm going national, not personal.
Okay.
But I have to say, for Nicola to be surprised that I'm I should put it, back horses. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I've kept that hidden under a bushel when I was the racing correspondent of the Herald, the racing correspondent of the Scotsman, the racing correspondent of the Sun newspaper. I only took a holiday from these racing columns when I was First Minister of Scotland.
Yeah.
And incidentally, that wasn't so that people didn't know I was interested in horse racing. That was because I thought you could survive many things as First Minister. But if you started tipping a run of losers by mistake in your racing column, I thought that would be the demise of my political career. But happily, I did a racing column for all these august journals. And if anything, it seemed to benefit me. But then, maybe I move in different circles from the First Minister. And are kind of aware that many people, particularly in working class Scotland, don't regard backing horses as a mortal sin. In terms of that stuff, come on, let's fight a campaign on the national issue facing Scotland about how to get independence, as opposed to personal stuff.
What about in the south of Scotland and in the Highlands and Islands, where the SNP do actually currently have list seats? Is there more of a dilemma for voters in those regions?
Well, people will have to take a judgment and see what they think the upside and the downside is, of course. But Alapa, we're not campaigning on the constituencies precisely because we believe the SNP mandate will stand or fall by their constituency performance, both in terms of their share of the vote, which of course is a constituency issue. It always has been. What share of the vote did we get in 2011? 45% on the constituency. So the SNP, it's not for me to advise another political party how to conduct their campaign. But if I were leading an SNP campaign at the present moment, I'd spend a lot more time talking about how we get our constituency MSPs elected and the candidates and challenging to make sure they get in. And I'd be devoting all of my energies to making sure I lost none and gained some, rather than spending my time wondering about what's going to happen in the regional list, where the best will in the world, there are limited opportunities for the SNP and huge opportunities for the independents supporting Alapa candidates.
Obviously, your approach to securing independence it contains a broader range of options than the current SNP government. And would you nevertheless undertake that if the SNP government were to pursue a certain line towards attaining a referendum or towards attaining independence, you would support it and not make, perfection the enemy of the good, so to speak?
Well, yes. I mean, I'd welcome any indication that that option was being pursued seriously, as indeed would you, James, because I think you and I, as a regular leader of your analysis, are not far apart on that particular issue. Let's put it that way. So yes, I've right through my political career, I've never let the best be the enemy of the good. I've supported all sorts of things because I thought they were progress for Scotland, and that will continue to be my attitude. Now, the strength by which, our ideas are only options.
Yeah.
The SNP have an 11-point plan. We've effectively got a 1-point plan.
Yeah.
My reading of politics is that 1-point plans are usually better. My reading of politics is it's best not to put your eggs all in one basket.
Yeah.
Because it has the unfortunate consequence of telling your opponents what you're trying to do.
Yeah, sure.
Which has the added unfortunate consequences of them wanting to say no.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the independence movement, while of course there's good opinion polls for independence, and I welcome that, and I welcome the fact that people have regarded the SNP government's performance during the pandemic as such that that's given the independence movement a boost, and I think that's very, very, very important. But in strategic terms, in realpolitik terms, we might well argue that opportunities have gone a-begging in recent years, and it's important that they are put forward at least for consideration. Modestly, I would say that I did manage to deliver an independence referendum. And although people seem to think, well, that was an easy thing to do, was it? How did David Cameron come to the belief that all he had to do was to insist on a yes-no referendum, and he would allow the then First Minister of Scotland, myself, to set the time, to set the question, to set the electorate and the mandate required? Maybe that was all very simple to do, just that nobody else has ever done it.
Yeah. I suppose some people would want to know, do you regret using the phrase once in a generation? I know you always put that in the context that was only a personal view, but of course it's always been taken out of context. Do you regret putting that into the sort of political discourse?
Well, it's not my personal view bit. It's the bit about the Scottish people deciding that at every election.
Yeah.
That it is in there. I think there's a very famous interview where I introduced it for the first time with Jeremy Paxman.
Yeah.
One Angus Brendan McNeill circulates, and if you actually out of this exchange, give Angus a ring and ask him to send you it, because I know he has it on tap, because he wheels it out from time to time, and you'll see the first elucidation of once in a generation, right? And you'll see that it's put absolutely fairly and squarely. Of course, I can't dictate to the Scottish electorate. The Scottish electorate, each and every election, have the ability, if they so choose, to take a different view or take a view forward. It's always put in the context of Scottish democracy. If I've any regret about it, it's not making that aspect as clear as I should have done in every interview where I ever mentioned it.
Yeah.
Because democracy is never and cannot be a once and for all thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
There's no Westminster government can commit its successor. No Scottish First Minister can commit the Scottish people at an election, because circumstances and times change.
Yeah.
The thing I argued for all my political life, and as you see from the Declaration of Ellen, as we'll call it today, or the Declaration for Scotland, is the sovereignty of the Scottish people and their ability, each and every electoral test, to push forward the independence case at a timescale of their decision.
Yeah.
And I believe that the feeling in Scotland just now is not of cool, calm appraisal, let's wait for a while, a few years, and then we'll have a think about it. Yeah. What they want to see is decisive action on the independence question. Firstly, they want to see it injected into this election campaign, which I would claim as a success for Alapa already. Secondly, they expect if they elect an independence majority into the Parliament, there'll be a sense of urgency about achieving it.
Yeah.
I've suggested that in the first week of the Parliament, the government should be instructed to begin independence negotiations with Westminster. And thirdly, they expect to see a strategy. They don't necessarily expect the the government to reveal every aspect of its strategy or tactics, because for reasons already said, that's foolish. But they like to know there is one.
Yeah.
And some of the ideas that Alip are putting forward would be a substantial contribution. So I think we've achieved something already. We've injected independence back into the politics of Scotland. I don't mean an independence referendum. I mean independence.
Independence, yeah.
Because the strategy of the national movement is not to achieve an independence referendum, but to achieve independence, of which a referendum might be one, but not the only route, and certainly not Section 30, the only route by which the legitimacy is accepted in Westminster and worldwide to make the achievement of independence a realistic proposition.
Jerry Hassan, among others, has raised questions about the internal democracy of the Alpha Party. You know, obviously you haven't been elected as leader. The candidates haven't been selected by an elected process. I know that's impossible given the timescale, but going forward, will the Alpha Party become kind of normalised as a kind of a party with internal democracy?
I'll send you the Alpha Party constitution, which I can bet you. Well, here's me betting again. I was going to bet you your mortgage that Jerry Hassan has never read, never seen. My experience of Jerry is total ignorance of any facts. Has never been an inhibition in Jerry's writing.
All right. Well, to turn to another journalist, David Least, he always used to love to create.
I thought you were turning to another journalist.
Sorry, my apologies. A controversial journalist, David Least, who used to love to draw this distinction, which seemed artificial when he did it, between the real SNP and Altnats. So haven't you given him this golden opportunity to say, I was right all along, and the Alpha Party are the Altnats, the kind of the Trumpian outcasts of the SNP?
I'm in the very happy position that I've never been able to explain or even to understand David Least's logic on virtually anything. And therefore, in my happy, celebratory, entirely positive mode about the future of Scotland, let me say that the only opportunity I'm interested in this election is giving the people of Scotland the opportunity to accelerate forward the independence case.
One criticism that a commenter on my blog has made is that you're not seeking to be part of the government, and he thinks that is a problem for people wanting to vote for you, that it's not a sort of genuine proposition somehow. How would you answer that?
Well, that's certainly true. We're not seeking to be part of the government. That is not the aim of the Alpha Party. The aim of the Alpha Party, as was made clear at the first press conference I did, is threefold. One is to inject independence into the election debate and mobilise the independence supermajority, which is there and available if people choose to vote for it, which will transform Scotland's circumstances in negotiations with Westminster, in my estimation. That's aim number one. Aim number two is to inject into the debate a programme for economic recovery, which will pay some account of the economic tsunami which is coming our way very soon. I've seen nothing either from Westminster or from the Scottish Government which meets the scale of that challenge. And the third of our major objectives is to furnish and burnish the independence platform, because we're no longer in the world of 2014, we're in the world of 2021 and beyond. And many of the assumptions we made, in my view rightly, and other people's view wrongly, but at least we took our pick and lived with it in the white paper on independence, are no longer valid. I am struggling to see work that has been done to advance that platform. There was the Growth Commission, or the lack of Growth Commission, as people sometimes called it, but I'm yet to see. Maybe it's hiding away somewhere and will be unveiled in the course of this campaign. But certainly the Alpha Party will be making our contribution to suggesting how the independence case can be furnished and burnished to meet the realities of the modern age. And of course, there are other key issues in Scottish society where, it's no accident that among our 18 excellent women candidates are some of the strongest feminist voices in Scotland. I would expect and hope, well, actually I know because we passed it on Saturday, that their Women Inequalities platform will get a strong airing in the course of this campaign.
Okay, well, I think that's my time up. So thanks very much. And I wish you all sorts of luck with the election campaign. Thanks for your time.
Right, thanks, James. Good to see you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.